Today, 5 minutes earlier. But that must have surprised a few of you. Yes, yes. G'day, Richard. How are you, mate? Lance? Gabrielle? Hello, everyone. I asked this before, but I still haven't figured it out completely. I have a hard time sleeping without carbs. I feel like it's just a question of adaptation, but I would like to know. Seems like sometimes, yeah, that some people are not fat adapted and they seem to struggle at night. So there are some people in that category. There are a lot of variations. There's people exposing themselves to too much blue light, and that tends to create adaptation issues as well. So I found people that have got these sort of glasses in the evenings and stopped exposing themselves to blue light, then have no problem sleeping at all. So some people are just slightly a bit more sensitive to blue light. Your melanopsin in your eyes has a lot of DHA and taurine, and both of those are required. And if you don't have enough of those, either one of those, that can also affect sleep, circadian rhythms, and stuff like that. So it can be complicated to try and work out exactly all the drivers in that regard. So yeah, you got to play around with it. But I would recommend considering something like this. Anyway, let's move on. Mhm. And I'm just going to go through that until I find another question. As you can understand, do put the Q in front, or question, or Q, 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 Q. Everybody's got their little suggestions and thoughts. Sometimes I have to play around because it can be genetics. There can be a lot of different variations and things that can. Anyway, but that's the big one. Sleep hygiene, all this sort of stuff. You know, getting out in the mornings as this. So dawn to dusk, getting the signaling plays a big role, and keeping blue light out of your eyes plays another role. They all sort of help improve. Yes, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, we'll keep on going. Miller, yes. That's too many hours. Actually unhealthy to sleep at, really, for those sort of hours. A young person, sort of around 9 hours. Somebody a bit older. I found that when I was in like deep ketosis, I was doing 6.5 hours and I was fresh because you've got very little inflammation, very little repair to do. So there's a lot of factors uh, for the sleep length, but disrupted sleep is what we're talking about here, which is an issue. Exactly. Stuff. Does help. It lowers cortisol at night, and if you're exposed to a lot of blue light and you lower cortisol, and it also increases melatonin in the evening. So it actually improves sleep hygiene in a sense. Sort of stuff really helps to keep cortisol down at night because we go through cycles. In the morning, we go outside. And people that have started doing this trend of going outside very early in the morning, what they do is they wake themselves up. cortisol rises. It gets that transition in the dawn of and in the early hours in the morning. And so just before the sun comes up, early, that crossover between night and day, and it actually provides that signaling transition, and then the blue light comes through, and that provides that additional signaling, and then cortisol spikes, and you're actually provided with additional glucose and fatty acids to get going. And people usually, when they get out of bed in the morning, they're usually moving around like zombies. And the moment they actually do that signaling, what our ancestors would have done, they would have just walked out of the cave, got the signaling, or they would have been in their huts, igloos, or whatever. They would have got the signaling. Really important, these circadian rhythms. So, yes. Anyway, and that's the one you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on a number of different sites. Just look around until you find. So yeah, I don't I had a pair of the red, but I damaged them. I should replace them, but I still use these even in later at night. And I don't have a TV. I've got a projector, which I project on a wall. So um, I have and all my lights in my place are all sort of blue light. They've got no blue light in them. They're all amber or red. And so yeah, I keep my exposure down to a minimum. That's why I sleep right through really comfortably, and I wake up refreshed. So plus I have alcohol, and I cheat. Yeah, that can disrupt. But even this Friday, I actually had I went to a conference, um, spatial science and surveying institute that we're members of. So I had went to this conference. Some of our people actually also presented, and pretty much they had a few. I didn't, just had two glasses of wine. That was about it. So, and it didn't disrupt my sleep or anything like that. Be sociable, as they say. Didn't even drink the second one. There you go. Yeah, there are different thresholds of people because there are other underlying reasons. Um, but yeah, it does actually bring on sleep in the evening. Yeah, and it's just because it's a regulator. It doesn't it won't do it in the daytime if you have taurine. It just does it in the evening because it really works well amplifying those circadian rhythm regulation, which is nice. Doesn't cause other disruptions. It just works with because it's in the animal food, so it makes sense that it would work with at the right time. It's sort of not doing the thing, but it actually is a precursor that's required for these things to work properly. So so that's why it doesn't disrupt things. It just really enhances things. It just makes things work better. So really important. Yeah, some people need to restrict caffeine. It is a problem for some people. Myself, not a problem. I usually, even though obviously coffee is a contraindicated thing. It's not carnivore. Let's be honest. It's a cheat that we all do every day. I enjoy. Um, but it can, in some people, disrupt their sleep quite a bit. I usually, because I've got these longevity genes, I can clear out the caffeine pretty fast, about 4 times faster. So it's a non-issue. but other people are very sensitive. It stays in their system for far too long, and yeah, creates a lot of disruption. So you got to be careful with caffeine. After all, it is a low grade um, stimulant and low grade toxin with plenty of anti nutrients, depending on how you consume it. So it's definitely contraindicated, but many of us still enjoy it. I've got a brew here, which I'm waiting for 11 o'clock to turn up so I can actually break my time restricted feeding, pretty much, as most of you regulars know. Not good stuff. Not good stuff for the arteries. But if you can get it cheaper, buy it. The rest of us have to, in many cases, have to get it from overseas. So, yes. Deborah, how are you? And Stefan, how are you, mate? Oh, good for you. Good for you. Let's see whether I get a chance to get through them all. You may have to hold on to some for the next fortnight. You know how it is. Ah, fantastic. Enjoy. Good morning to you. Hello, Kitty. You said that you can sleep through the night, meaning without even having to pee once. Is that because you stopped drinking? Well, because I stopped eating, does help. Does help. So, sorry, I just ingested a bit dust from this. I need to clean this. Look, some people are more sensitive to their when it comes to the upregulation of antidiuretic hormones. Some people tend to consume a lot of beverages throughout the day out of habit, which I find I used to do as well. It used to disrupt my sleep. But as I've cut back on consuming, I mean, I usually have two coffees and in the daytime. So I'll have one around 11ish at work and I'll have one around 3ish, depends. It's a usually that's the 2 times of the day that I'll usually have, coffee. I'll have, it's it varies. It's not exactly precise. Between anywhere between 11:30 and, probably 12:30 when I have my first sort of type of snack. I'll, have in some water. I'll consume, some taurine, um, and if I'm not having eggs that day, some choline, things of that sort, a bit of L-citrulline, and then in the afternoon, I'll have the other because I have 2 grams in, and I'll have 4 grams in the afternoon. So I'm probably getting about 3, maybe 4 glasses of water in. For that amount, yeah, it's reduced my level of peeing, so to speak, throughout the day. So I rely more on hydration from fat by being fat adapted. So that's another potential reason why some people um, can't sort of deal with hydration. The biggest problem is it takes a bit of time to become fat adapted to produce enough internal water. And some people have a bit more difficulty. It seems some people can take a whole year before you know, they struggle for a whole year, and then after a year they go, "Oh, I don't need as much water. I'm not feeling dehydrated or anything like that." So yeah, it seems to be individual. It's not very clear why some people take longer or shorter amount of time to adapt to internal water production. It's not, there's obviously going to be issues like mitochondrial efficiency. It took me quite a while because I had a lot of mitochondrial damage that I've been healing for some time. Because you don't get cardiovascular disease in your mid 40s without having sustained a lot of damage. So and mitochondrial damage means you struggle with weight, you struggle with all these things. You struggle with healing because you've got less energy. You're producing less energy, you know. So people who tend to have a lot of senescence or cancer or stuff like that, they've got a lot of mitochondrial damage. A young person's got a lot of mitochondrial density can heal very fast because they can produce more energy. It's all down to energy, how much energy your body can produce and all that. And it's the same thing. It's related to water and all that. So it's taking me to get to this stage like a whole decade of healing. It doesn't happen overnight. You've got, as I've said, you look a lot of these mechanistic studies of rats. They say 2 to 4 months or 3 months is the equivalent in human lifespan, 9.83 years. I- I'm always reminding people that, the cellular turnover to heal, repair, and fix things, considering also that you've got less energy capacity, it takes time. You've got to be patient, you know, to heal. Other people heal faster because they've got less damage, you know. Just because you see somebody and they go, "Oh, I've got all these sort of ailments," they may have a whole lot of, fibrosis and a whole lot of other issues that are required to. I mean, a bit like Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela. She had a lot of issues, but not as much mitochondrial damage, but a lot of sensitivities like bone sensitivities, issues with joints and stuff like that. But she had good mitochondrial efficiency because she was still young, she hadn't done a lot of damage. And so you can recover much faster. Where somebody being in their 50s, as an example, they're going to have much harder time to repair, and it's going to take a bit longer. So there's these variations that we need to remind ourselves that, and we need to keep these in mind. So that is another part that can affect your peeing. But obviously, if you're drinking a lot of like coffee, like some of the beverages out there that have got caffeine and stuff like that, that has a sort of an antidiuretic. Consuming taurine very late at night, it should be, as I said, I've always said about the last gulping down of taurine should be between 5 and 6. And the reason for that is because it also has a bit of an effect on fluid dynamics in the body. So there's all these factors that are playing a role, that potentially could affect sleep hygiene. We've covered a lot of things, things like blue light that can also affect. I've had people that used to pee at night and get disrupted sleep. They went blue light blocking and all that. They didn't change anything else. It was just basically that they were exposed too much blue light. They couldn't generate enough um, sort of melatonin to turn off a lot of these functions. Because what happens is the body goes, okay, we're going to stop the bladder from releasing. We're going to do all this sort of stuff because this person's asleep. We're going to paralyze their body so they can get that sleep. Well, if you're exposed to too much blue light, that could be your problem. So there could be a lot of factors that could be at play. Why disruption? You know, I personally don't know, even with my case, because I used to, about 4 or 5 years ago, I used to have, not a lot, like some people, but the occasional where if it wasn't alcohol related, but the occasional issue where I would wake up at night having no idea why it happened. But when I got this blue light blocking, also hygiene and all that, all went away. So that was the other element in the. So I'm saying there could be a lot of factors. You need to keep that in mind. You need to basically do a bit of, N of one experimentation to see where you are at. But I try to keep, I say to people after 9 o'clock, avoid any beverage. Some people, they should stop at like 7 or 8. But unfortunately, in today's world, people are staying up late, drinking, you know, certain things, and that affects them. I find with my situation, it doesn't. I mean, I have some of those kombuchas, like a 9 or 10. Sometimes I still doesn't interrupt my sleep. I don't get up to pee because I'm in deep sleep and the stuff. But in the morning when I wake up, if I've had like one of those drinks in the evening, like 10 o'clock or whatever, the moment I get up in the morning, I'm busting to go to the toilet because that's when you know everything comes alive again and goes, oh, I'm not asleep anymore. And you know that. And that's how you know that this is really working. So circadian rhythms is the one of the biggest ones that most people neglect. They're always looking, oh, am I drinking in the evening? Am I doing this? And I'm going, are you exposing yourself to too much blue light in the evening? That usually is the big one that most people ignore. G'day, David. Hi, Harry. You mentioned early on in your heart coenzyme Q10. Do you think? Nah, look, I used coenzyme Q10 for 1 year, ubiquinol in the reduced form, and that was because I was taking a statin. So once I came out of the hospital, um, how can I put it? I was no more. I was no longer trusting of the system anything because at that moment, my whole belief system about all the stuff that I've been told and heard and stuff like that was shattered. You know, I had zero confidence in the system. I just went through the motions. I was scared. That's why I got on a statin because I was scared. Fear does that to you sometimes. But then I looked into it and said, okay, reading the fine print, I saw all these side effects and I'm going, oh, that doesn't seem good. And so I started looking at a bit of a literature and, that was my first foray into the literature. And I came across some Japanese studies, and those Japanese studies were saying, well, that some of these side effects are due to the downstream effect on coenzyme Q10 production, how that affects energy production in the mitochondria. And I go, oh, that's interesting. So what do you use for that? Well, they recommended in Japan, it's actually recommended if you're taking statins to take coenzyme Q10. A bit more enlightened compared to the medical establishments elsewhere. And so I started taking high doses of coenzyme Q10, and some of the, you could say, like the muscle aches and some stuff that I felt a bit going into about 2 to 3 months before I'd taken the coenzyme Q10. I'm going, this statin stuff seems to have a bit of side effects. And once I got the coenzyme Q10 in, those things went away. And I go, okay, the Japanese got it right there. It does help. But that doesn't mean that it's a mitochondrial poison. It's still causing other issues. So how do I get off this and how do I find an alternative? And that's how I continued in on from there. Most animal foods, if you're on a carnivore diet, you should get enough coenzyme Q10 and a lot of the precursors that are required to synthesize in your own body. So I have less of an issue for people that are getting sufficient animal foods in to worry about supplementing with coenzyme Q10. It was more to do with um, the issues related to the statins that I was taking at the time. Now, in hindsight, I'm still I would have gone on a more species appropriate diet and, transitioned to it, and I wouldn't have bothered it with statins. But they do have their place, like a 6-month thing. I know they're a contraindicated thing that have problems with coenzyme Q10, taking it for 6 months. If somebody's just come out of cardiovascular disease and they've got unstable angina, it calcifies and stabilizes. So I sort of see it as a sort of a hack. I think that's where the I don't think it's the a lot of people say that statins have got an anti-inflammatory effect. They do, but it's so little. You can get an anti-inflammatory effect from many other things far more potent than what you'll get from statins. I think that's completely irrelevant. What I think it does is because it calcifies the arteries, it pretty much what it causes is stable angina. So if people have got unstable angina around their body, it will stabilize it. That's where the benefit lies. But after that, it starts creating more problems than it's worth. So short-term use to stabilize angina and calcify it quicker, and then use a protocol to remove it, which is basically, using minoquinone 4, species appropriate diet, low inflammatory diet, some fasting, and using things like L-citrulline for better vasodilation, taurine, and stuff like that to break down a lot of this fibrotic tissue and sort things out, re-regulate a lot of the actual mechanisms that clean up all this mess, break down all the fibrosis in your heart as well, which is what I did. That's why I got discharged by Cardiology Tasmania, because pretty much they couldn't find any more fibrosis. My mild sort of heart attack that I had back 12, around about 12 odd years, slightly over 12 years now. Yeah. So yeah, keep that in mind. So I wouldn't bother supplementing. It's an expensive supplement and you don't really need it. But if you're trying to stabilize angina, it can be useful short term as a short term option. Fantastic. I had lamb yesterday down at my brother's. We pretty much had quite a bit of lamb, and he actually made a nice little roast on the rotisserie, which was really nice. It was did it over 2 hours, and it just was soft as, perfect. Anyway, yeah, the big one will be taurine to help really break a lot of the fibrosis and clear up a lot of that sort of stuff. What happens is a lot of the times when people have heart attacks or whatever, the thing that does most of the damage isn't the initial heart attack. It's actually the blood perfusion. When blood after the blockage sort of dissipates a bit, rushes back in. That blood that comes in brings a lot of oxygen. And there's a lot of, at that moment, because you've actually got from the hypoxic environment breakdown of tissue and free electrons floating, they react the oxygen and it creates a lot of oxidative stress. And that oxidative stress is what does the additional damage. Well, guess what taurine does? It's the only thing shown in actual research in an animal model. Obviously, you can't deliberately induce heart damage in a healthy person to do an experiment. So you have to do it in an animal. But when they put taurine in, it prevents, and the same thing with strokes. The recovery from strokes, the recovery from heart disease or heart attacks is fantastic, but it's in high doses. So you got to email me and give me details, and then I'll set you on the right track of how to put it all together. Give me a bit of a history rundown. Now I am behind on some of my emails, I know, as normal. So yeah, there's a bit of a delay, at least a week plus. So sorry, but it is what it is. Uh, Look, some people do go and actually they've gone to chiropractors or have gone to people that do certain yoga things, and they've learned to sort of train and also um, when you're peeing, the on off type thing sort of helps in, strengthening those muscles. You can actually do that as well. Pee, stop, pee, stop type thing. Those sort of things. Yes, they do, especially if, sometimes women after pregnancy, they can have issues where the muscle around the sort of bladder can actually be weakened, and sometimes certain exercises can help fix that. Sometimes they can't. They may require some surgical intervention to stitch up um, that muscle, those muscle fibers. So it sort of depends. So you need to really, depending on your circumstances, consider all that. G'day, Lukey. By the way, the pork from you is very nice. A lot of fat, still have 2 in the freezer. I thought you'd like it. Really nice, isn't it? It's the slab that I got. I gave Hello Kitty some of these bit of pork rind type. Well, yeah, sort of on the bone. It was still on the bone. It's sort of pork ribs, but it's got a lot of the actual skin on it. So they didn't take the skin. It's the fat and the skin, and it really nice the way they left it on. They broke it. They broke the bone, so you grab the little bones and just eat it off the little bones. So it's really nice. I'm glad you enjoyed them. Yeah, I've still got some. I left some. I didn't have a chance last week. They're in my fridge at work. The other pack, so that I'd actually pulled out of the freezer. So it's sitting there. Monday, something to munch on. Anyway, that's tomorrow. Necro Kitty, how are ya? I enjoyed your video on Syrian. Is it worth supplementing? Nah, we get enough on a carnivore diet, So you know, so don't bother. It was more to make a case for the carnivore diet. If you're not eating a carnivore diet, obviously you're not going to be getting enough sufficient serum, you know. And we can synthesize. I mean, you've probably heard phosphatidylserine in our bodies. We can synthesize that. It's the only well-known. Um, they use it in a supplemental form in high doses in Israel. Obviously, those people don't consume a carnivore diet, and those Ashkenazi Jews have a specific sort of neurodegenerative disease, and they use it, and it just turns off the genes, completely turns off the genes. Serine is a very powerful amino acid, so, and we get plenty in our diet as carnivores, so I wouldn't bother supplementing. It's really for people that are under eating animal foods. Those people tend to have these issues, and when they supplement, it sort of improves their situation. But yeah, there is no need to supplement. Look, the stocks. It seems like a lot of people have experimented, and with a bit of feedback that I've actually got from a number of people, it seems that any uh, nicotinamide out there seems to do the trick. It's it's sort of like neutral between the companies. Um, so I haven't come across anybody coming back and saying, "Well, Harry, it didn't really work for me." So it does actually improve hydration. But, as I said, there can be cases where there's potential of anything, the potential, but most of the stock standard nicotinamides out there will do the same thing. So I've used in the past, and a few other people have used in the past, a number of different brands, and it hasn't seemed to, not have the same effect. Now, there could be some stuff out there that's really dodgy or really poor quality that, I don't. I usually, all the supplements I get, I make sure they don't have any fillers and crap, and they tend to be a bit better quality. So so there could be some differences, but I haven't investigated it flight, uh, you know, to with with authoritative definitiveness to say yes. Um, but from anecdotal evidence from other people that have tried different brands and stuff like that, it seems to still work. So, and it's the actual the thing itself. This um, you know B3 molecule just seems to basically work. They put it in a lot of the creams, the skin creams and all that. They put it in for that purpose to provide greater hydration to the skin. So it's there's a good research. It's been shown quite clearly that it does definitely do that. Is there a difference between brands? Maybe a subtle difference. I can't be 100% sure. I can't say. I haven't come across any experiments to show that certain brands hydrate better than others. I did a bit of a cursory check, but yeah, I didn't really find anything that convinced me either way. Obviously, all the skin brands out there that put it into the actual skin products will make bigger claims. Um, there's a whole lot of other things in there as well that could have be playing a role, so who knows in that regard. But in the general, where they've just looked mechanistically, just nicotinamide on its own with nothing else, they've actually seen an improvement in hydration after they've done like skin biopsies, look at the actual hydration of those skin cells. So we know it hydrates. Uh, are there other factors that are at play that could affect it negatively or positively? That wasn't teased out. The research was only that I looked at was only looking at that molecule and nothing else. So I couldn't tell you beyond that molecule is fine. Beyond that, no news. Troy, how are you, mate? Anyway, in the morning, is it important to get natural light? Definitely, 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 definitely. Well, that's because you're actually getting the wrong signal. When you're getting from bulbs or smartphones and all that are very intense, what it's actually telling you it's midday. You're telling your body it's midday. You're confusing your body. And if it's midday, in the afternoon, you may become drowsy. And if you become drowsy in the afternoon, if you're in an office environment, then you may struggle to sleep in the evening. Got it? So it can disrupt your circadian rhythms. It's a bit like night shift workers have similar issues, So, and it's usually that's why I and um, on that issue with night shift workers that they should not eat after the sun goes down at all. Nothing. Zilch. Should be only so they come in from a night shift, they go to sleep, they make sure that there's no light coming through, and then when they wake up, they have their meal, and all through the night as they're working, they do not eat anything. They fast throughout the whole night. A lot of and that will actually improve their general health as well. I've had a number of night shift people that done that and they've lost weight where they've struggled with weight loss or they've struggled with other issues. And immediately by sorting out their eating time has played a big role. And again, that is because it's sort of synchronizing some of the circadian systems, the clocks, the internal clocks, and not causing as much disruption because there's different clocks. There's your clocks that are involved in metabolizing food. They go through cycles from the morning right through in the early evening. They go through cycles because you're going through these circadian cycles. So these other clocks that are controlling other elements are going through those. By eating appropriately in daytime, you're actually making sure that those clocks are working. Your main clock obviously is being disrupted slightly, but I do say to people to wear these in the evenings as well, like later. So not in the early evenings, but when they get beyond like 3 o'clock in the morning, these on. So to start preparing the body for the early morning when they're going to go to sleep. Anyway, that's for another day. Should I take taurine before sleep? No, much earlier. It takes about 90 minutes to saturate the whole body, and it also is required earlier to bring down the cortisol levels and help increase the melatonin level. So it should be about 6, 7 o'clock around that time at the latest. George, how are you, mate? Yeah, I started using Efflux program on my PC. Yes, I do have that on mine as well. Even though because we still have melanopsin on our skin. So anyway, um, why? Oh, after a stent. Okay, you've had a stent. Okay, that's a bit of a different thing. Now you can actually get L-citrulline, and L-citrulline is a vasodilator. It actually and taurine and L-citrulline actually work well to keep down some of the clotting factors. So it's regulates things a hell of a lot better. Yeah. One thing I wouldn't have done is a stent, personally. That's I would have approached things a bit differently. But anyway, I can't comment on your decision or your medical. That's between you and your physician. But personally, I wouldn't have done it in that regard because then they put you on a lifetime of blood thinners and all sorts of things, and they do have side effects. Unfortunately, people are pushed in that direction when if you need a stent, it means that you don't have a severe blockage. It would have been much better to basically take, but you weren't informed, Mark, I understand. Much better to take something like a statin for 6 months, calcify and stabilize that angina, and then clean up your lifestyle and everything to try and actually then clear it all up. Um, Obviously, you probably weren't at the time a carnivore. You're in the general sort of like myself. Potentially, I could have gone down the same path if I didn't have a severe blockage that I had. So obviously, you don't get a mild heart attack if you don't have severe blockage. So So it was like one of those micro types, but it still caused a bit of damage, but didn't kill me. That's the only difference. Yes. Oh, that lovely seed oil refined sugar does wonders for your blood vessels. Um, you need to go slowly between 2 grams and up, and slowly transition. Yeah, for most people, if not doing a medical protocol, which that means they need to come and see me before they start doing any. Up to 6 grams, not an issue. Potentially even up to 10. Some experiments say is not an issue as a short-term thing, but when we're doing much higher dosages, there are a whole lot of other factors we need to take into consideration. So, you know, and usually people will do like some people will do it, if they're having 3 meals a day, they'll do two, 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 and two. Especially if somebody's on a sad diet and you're trying to actually trying to bring down because it does lower your blood sugars. And obviously, you don't, if somebody's on a sad diet, you do not want that person taking high doses because they'll go hypoglycemic. They're on blood pressure meds, their blood pressure will drop quite a bit. They could pass out. So it's risky with a sad dieter recommending taurine. Um, but if you have a family member, and I've actually people that are sad dieters that I know, and I usually say to them, have 2 grams with every meal. What it does is, with that every meal, it will lower their blood sugar levels. It means that they won't get as much of a spike. And that what they've told me is, oh, I don't snack as much. I don't feel like as hungry in between meals. Got it? So it's actually improving their insulin sensitivity. It's improving their blood glucose levels. It's actually bringing them slightly down those 2 grams that they're having with every single meal, and it's lowering their blood pressure slightly. And some of these people are on a sad diet and are getting off some of this medication. So it's hard to convince people to change to do radical changes to their life when they're so used to it. We know from each other. I mean, where were we a couple of years back, or me 12 years back before having cardiovascular disease? I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have those conditions. Let's be honest with ourselves. So in that regard, um, if you're going to recommend anything, got to be very careful, especially when people are on you know, blood pressure medication and blood sugar lowering medication as well, like metformin and things like that. So there are options that you can actually use strategically like that. But for yourself, being on a carnivore diet, 6 is fine, 2 in the morning, 4 in the early evening, improve your sleep and everything else. Yeah, not an issue at that level. Above that, come and see me. Drop me a line, discuss your issues thoroughly. A lot of details, so I can make a proper diagnosis. What's the healthier way to put on body fat for wintertime? Eat excess fat, eat seasonal fruit with cream. Well, both one will engage the Randall cycle if you eat seasonal fruit with cream, but also will add deuterium. I'd rather get just the extra liquid fat. So if you were to guzzle down cream, like for a month or so or whatever, you'll put on a bit of body fat for winter. So struggling to have enough, energy or stuff like that. Some people, because they've got very good mitochondrial efficiency, they're younger, they tend to tear off, um, you know, that adipose or other struggle because of mitochondrial damage. So it's the complete opposite. And if you're in that complete opposite state, well, the best way is to use liquid fats like cream. Um, Consuming quite a bit of that will put on some adipose tissue, and then that's you can lose it over the other months again and cycle a bit like, because that's what towards the end of summer, um, autumn, those sort of areas or that period, our ancestors did the same thing. Before, in the glacial periods, they gorged on massive amounts of fat in this sort of with it, and being a bit more sedentary, so they'd actually kill a big animal and then just gorge on it for days, and so that they would consume and sit around, not really. So there are many strategies. Others are engaging the Randall cycle with, fruit, honey, things like that, which was a seasonal thing that people still do, tribal people still do today. So they still consume seasonal honey, they still consume certain seasonal fruit. There's not a lot of fructose in those sort of things because they're not refined like the stuff that we buy in supermarkets. They're not hybridized or anything like that. They're much smaller amounts. But if you're eating a massive amount of fat from fatty animals at the end of the season, even a small amount of fructose thrown in there will help push up. So sometimes you go, berries. And then you take out the berries and you notice, oh, I'm eating the same amount of fat, but I'm not actually I'm starting to lose a bit. Well, because even the small amount of fructose will help with that, building up fat, because it does interfere with fructose does interfere with mitochondrial function, which then puts you in more storage form. It's the reason why fructose is the best way to fatten up. Easiest way, actually. The way is to guzzle down excess animal fats of one sort or another, and liquid fats are the quickest way of doing that. Ricky, how are you, mate?
Hello, Harry. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I know that if you require to put on a bit of adiposity, you'd go for the liquid fat rather than the high deuterium sugary plants.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I try to get best quality heavy cream I can find, so it can get a bit expensive, but I tried it a couple of times. It's very enjoyable.
Exactly. Does too much fat lead to bloating stools, or rather diarrhea? I had a lot of diarrhea and stopped, but now it is often floating. Well, it may not be related to the fat, because sometimes people can actually get, from too much protein, they can get a bit of diarrhea as well. So the fat and is required for or constipation. They can get both. They can go from constipation or diarrhea and stuff like that. On the other hand, a bit funny. It depends on gut motility, bacterial strains, and all sorts of things, variables in that regard. But it could also be a gallbladder issue that hasn't been resolved completely, especially if the color is a lighter color. If your diarrhea is a lighter color, it's really one of the biggest giveaways that it's gallbladder related. And then you just have to persist with slightly higher doses of taurine to sort of try and force the issue to clear up, to emulsify all that stuff and sort of clear it all out. G'day, Shelley. Just noticed Shelley's in the house as well. And Babs as well. God, everybody's here today. And without a scoop, should be able to buy yourself little plastic. I actually bought myself little plastic, like 2 grams and 1 gram scoops. That's what I use. I think it's about for
I think it's like 3 grams for a
that's it.
teaspoon.
That's it. 3 grams for a flat
Flat
teaspoon.
teaspoon.
Yeah. That's exactly. I couldn't remember. That's close enough. But if you want to do like 6 and you want to do 2 and 4, it's really hard with a damn teaspoon to try and work it out. But you can. I mean, you can estimate it, but we don't have to be religious about it. It has to be precise. But yeah, having those little spoon things really are helpful. Those plastic ones that have got 2 grams or 1 gram or whatever. So I've got a number of those. Are very useful. Hey, John, to have you here, mate. Nomad Man, hello to you as well. Oops. Stop doing that. StreamYard. Hi, how are you? Do you know a good person to consult with for alcoholism? Bart K. Approach him or Pim. Pim does more of the addiction stuff. Yeah, probably Pim. Pim would be the best person for addictions. So if you check my featured channels, you'll actually see him and other people like that. I convinced my dad to try Carnivore with me, but he's having trouble quitting alcohol. Well, the other nice thing about with alcohol that is a bit of a look, the science is a bit murky, but there is some evidence out there that taurine helps reduce the sort of the addictiveness. So there is actually some research out there, showing that supplementing with taurine reduces alcohol addiction, but they have no idea the mechanism, how it works. They haven't worked that out yet. They've just done some pilot studies and stuff like that, but nobody's really worked out how the hell it actually works. So I've got no research to sort of give you and say, look, here's 100% proof. But there's some observational stuff where it shows that there is definitely a reduction in groups of people that are given a supplemental taurine, a reduction in the sort of the addictive behavior. The only problem with those studies is they weren't as well controlled, and could there be a bit of a placebo effect there? I don't know. That's why I haven't done a video on it, because I'm not confident. It's still in the speculative realm. So, and when we say speculation, we mean maybe just bullshit. So I just say to people, you can give it a try and see whether it actually has any effect or not. Giving it in the evening, because sometimes people, it could be psychological as well. Sometimes people use alcohol at night to calm themselves down or to desensitize themselves, to be more precise. And it could be that taking taurine in the evening, like 4 grams, sort of brings down cortisol, increases melatonin, increases GABA-A, which is the key thing that actually reduces excitation in the brain. So it calms you down, brings down anxiety and all this. That's what taurine does. It's a great regulator for the brain in calming it down. And by calming it down, it may be just enough to basically people feel, oh, I'm fine, I don't need the alcohol. It may be that effect, a psychological rather than a sort of a physical, So, but at the same time, to get some advice on some, because that's, obviously that's not a complete approach to alcoholism or alcohol consumption. You still really need to discuss with someone, because people have what is called associated behaviors. that means they eat certain things or do certain things, and they associate things. We know it ourselves, drink a coffee, you light up a smoke. People used to do that. I used to do that. And so there are these other associations. So you may have to deal with a number of these other interrelated addictions and behaviors. So it's not okay. The thing taurine calms you down. It reduces your addictive behavior, but it doesn't solve the addictive behavior, is what I'm trying to say. So I would recommend Pim Johnson as the person to go to, and have a chat with her and do a bit of a consultancy with her. She's pretty good at dealing with addictions, even with Ted's addictions, apparently. Anyway, Troy, lots of buzz about monk fruit, stevia, erythritol, thoughts on the safety causes, cancer. The cancer stuff is just nonsense. I've already covered that in the previous live stream. And I've talked about stevia and some of the issues there. There is a video on stevia, so you can go away and actually check that out. Just Google my name and all that. Monk fruit, again, it's another one of those things. It tends to increase people's what with anecdotal evidence, a bit of appetite and other things like that. So we want to, alcohol sugars are not really the way to go. The only thing that the body internally produces, glucose or fructose and all that, is it produces as a byproduct erythritol. The body does produce that. And when you actually take erythritol, it actually only absorbs about 10%, 90% ends up in the bowl anyway. So it's poorly absorbed. And so it doesn't really have, get into your bloodstream or stuff like that to be an issue. And that sort of cancer stuff is just associated nonsense. So it's irrelevant. Pretty much. I think everybody's debunked it now. So yeah, that's pretty much covering all that. So I wouldn't worry, but we try to minimize these sort of things because they do have this level of behavioral addictions that they maintain, and that's part of the problem. And it's something that Pim's looked into and realized that a lot of these alcohol, sugars, and other things tend to play a bit of a game on your body and make and increase your appetite in some cases. And there's good research as well to show that increase appetite, so people will consume more than they're not. It's sort of causing some derangements in some of their hormones and some of their signaling. So yeah, you got to be careful with that sort of stuff. Yeah. Leila, also, you're welcome. But remember, go on chat also with Pim and get some pointers on her. There's no magic pill here that taurine, let's give taurine. Yeah, it'll calm your dad down. If he's actually taking 2 grams with every, because he's probably doing 3 meals a day, 2 grams with every meal, get him on 1 gram initially and then get him up to 2 with every meal. And what it will do is it'll bring his blood glucose down. It'll bring his blood pressure down. It'll actually normalize these a bit better. They'll still be on the high normal. They won't be, in the completely normal range, but it will reduce, you could say, his these big spikes and all that. And that itself may also improve his relationship with alcohol. Because because a lot of people also, it's like the binging thing that a lot of the snacks that they have in between because of these your blood sugar and insulin spiking up and down all day. So all these things are related, and so it may be one way of actually dealing with that sort of stuff. So keep that in mind. Now, Sandra. It's 11:30 and I forgot my coffee as usual. I'll just go through here. Negro Kitty, say, how are you? I never had a problem with cheating on my diet for years until I started eating grocery store yogurt. Yeah, the problem with grocery store yogurt is the alcohol sugars and yeah, a lot of that sort of stuff. That's the biggest problem. Been having mad cravings for non-carnivore stuff since give it up, a month on yogurt. Yeah, yeah. Like some plain Greek yogurt. It's one of those funny things. Either you manage it well or you don't. I'm hoping that was what you were consuming, just plain Greek yogurt with no other stuff in there. Now, the problem is, in some countries, they do add other, like alcohol sweetness and all that. You got to read the labels. Got to read the labels. I get a brand where there's, like in supermarket that I go, there's about 4 or 5 brands of Greek yogurt. Just one of them doesn't have any other crap in it. You go through and go, oh, that's just got plain. It's just got some probiotics. It's just got the actual very little left over of whatever the initial lactose sugar was from the animal. That's been pretty much the bacteria have fermented to a large extent. Where all the other ones have got addition because and that yogurt also is a bit more tart. And the reason is more tart. That's a giveaway when a yogurt is tart, a plain yogurt. It means that it's got more bacteria and very little and much less sugar. That's milk sugar. That is, that's been pretty much fermented, and that's where the tartness comes from. Where on the other hand, if most other ones, and that's the reason why in a lot of the brands they put alcohol sweeteners in there. Alcohol sweeteners tend to increase cravings and addictions, especially some of the types.
Harry, what about certain bacterial strains that may stimulate appetite? Couldn't that be a thing as well?
Yep. I talked about that in the past, that there are certain strains of Acidophilus that have a tendency to increase. And I know some of these companies don't do the right thing, and they put the Acidophilus strains, not the ones that are beneficial, but the ones that actually increase addiction, so they can sell more product. And it is really damn annoying. And you usually know, you take, like the one that I eat, if I eat a certain amount, I'm done. And I tried one of the others, and I can tell you, I know exactly what you mean, Necro-Kitty. Oh, so you're avoiding the ones with the Acidophilus, and they were plain. Okay, that's weird. Maybe yogurt is just not for you. I'd give it a miss, because if you're getting cravings, I know from my own experience, I get no cravings after having plain yogurt. And mine has also an Acidophilus strain, but not an Acidophilus strain that actually causes these addictions. And it's got a couple of other strains as well. I'd say definitely give it a miss in that regard. Yeah, I could not tell you what really is driving that at all, because it just doesn't make sense from my own experience and experience of other people that have had similar experiences with me. But certain yogurts, I definitely know. Now, unless I don't know what the labeling laws are in the US. I'm in Australia, so in some countries the labeling laws are a bit more, and in some states in the US a bit more laxed. They're not required to actually report on everything, and that's where you need to go. There's some review sites where you can actually review the product, and it'll actually tell you about everything that's in it. Especially if it's an established product that's been around for a while, they would have a review on it. And they would have sent it to a laboratory to find out exactly whether the claims of the label are correct or not, because they can be sometimes BS. And so there's a couple of sites that specialize on exposing the food industry and saying, well, hold on, you made these claims, but that's not the case. This is what we've found in there. Babs, US labeling laws are lax across the board, other than like California. Okay, so pretty much really lax. Okay, that's a problem in itself. Yeah, that would be a problem, because potentially then they could put anything in there without actually even requiring to, at a certain dose. I've heard this, that in America, if it's below a certain dose, they're not required to basically state it. But, if you put a bacterial strain at a certain dose initially, it still will grow more in that medium. So the initial amount is not going to necessarily be the same amount that it's going to be by the time the consumer consumes it. Okay. Talk about deceptive advertising. God, I didn't realize it was that bad. I thought you guys were a bit better than us. God, it sounds like you're worse than us. God. Okay. Okay, so Shelley's having the same issue, and I know she's in Ohio. NecroKitty's in Texas, so obviously it must be an American thing, a US thing. Okay. Yeah, look, I'm really lucky to be in Tasmania. That I can access so much local produce that's done, in a very traditional way with very little other inputs. Our food labels are not like they just a couple of ingredients, and where I notice in the US when some people show on their channels American food labels, there's just a plethora of shit, just one after this emulsifier, that, whatever. I'm going, how many bloody things do you have to put in a yogurt or this food or that food? So yeah, could be, who knows what substance in the damn thing is actually causing the issue. Yeah. I'm not going to comment on US stuff because I don't know enough.
Yeah, no, it seems to be there must be a matter of like personal health and things of that sort, because over here, like anything I get that is plain yogurt, they don't even specify what cultures are in it. And
Okay.
I've never had any issues, but I never struggled with poor satiety. So
yeah. Look, I think the golden rule should be for people, because none of us can know exactly what's in our food supply 100% of the time. And I think if you don't react well to something, just don't consume it. I think that should be the golden rule. It makes it eliminates the complications of guessing. So yeah, as Shelley says, everything is pasteurized to death. Only leaves the sugar. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they even take a lot of the cream away to sell it, and they then dilute it with a lot of water and whatever else, and it's like sugary water. Some of the stuff that and then they'll put. I know that for kids at school they'll put flavorings in them, and it's all chemical flavorings, not really not real chocolate or anything. And I'm going, I've heard these horror stories about the US sort of food stuff that they provide.
There's this disgusting drink that has become popular here. It's basically factory whey that has been like pasteurized. It's left over from whatever stuff they're doing, like cheese or whatever. And they'll add some flavors to it, like chocolate, vanilla, and they'll market it as a super protein source beverage that you can have. And the people that are into fitness, they down that stuff and they think they're doing amazing because they're having liquid protein that is like sweet and tasty, and that's basically industrial waste.
Crazy. Yeah. It's unfortunate. The reality is that a lot of the issues out there are just crazy. Yes, very unfortunate in that regard. You're welcome. Best way to get rid of gall and liver stones. Taurine's one of the best ways because it emulsifies. Also, there could be recycling issues. Some people get a lot of diarrhea when they have like gallbladder issues, and they cannot recycle the bile. That it ends up in their stool, in their colon, causing a lot of problems with the gut bacteria because, remember, bile cleanses the small intestine of bacteria. You don't want, otherwise you get SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, but you don't want the bile ending up in the colon, So a bit of it, about 5% does, and that's fine. It sort of keeps the bacterial colonies there under control so they don't become excessive. But then the rest of it gets recycled. Now, if it's not getting recycled, that's another issue in itself. That definitely will end up in your colon, making a mess of this is where they talk about bile being toxic to the colon and stuff like that. It's really deranging the gut bacterial strains and all that, but it's all related. Eat a non-species appropriate diet, don't get enough taurine, you don't emulsify it properly, you don't get enough choline, which plays a big role in the liver and gallbladder regulation and stuff like that. Both those do. Then you get derangements of certain enzymatic pathways like the FXR, and things don't work. And so you need things then like milk thistle helps with the FXR pathway, so does taurine, so does choline, to get these things working properly. And it can vary how many months it can take between people and how much, even when you resolve I had up to nearly struggling for 2 years because of severe sludge in my gall, the actual ducts themselves, the ones that go from the gallbladder to the pancreas. Those ducts had a lot of lining of sludge. And so I would have these common episodes and sometimes pain on the left-hand side below my rib cage, which is where, your pancreas is. I had a bit of inflamed pancreas as well. Dad had severe because he had a gallstone that came out inflamed to bugger his pancreas, but then it resolved pretty fast and no issues whatsoever. But people that have sludge, oh God, you can struggle. And I was one of those struggling, with issues of loose stools and stuff like that for quite some time. I can tell you it was very unpleasant going to work and having to constantly take toilet breaks and stuff like that. So, yeah. So I went through some of that hell myself. And I know, when people tell me about their experience, I know exactly because I've experienced it myself. Okay. So gallstones, and I had a lot of small little pebble type gallstones, but also a lot of sludge. And I would get these, I'd be just normal. My poo would be normal for days, and then all of a sudden, all hell would break loose as sludge came through and just made a mess within my colon. So yeah, pretty much I know exactly. So it takes time, perseverance. I have covered a lot of this sort of stuff in my digestive issues playlist where I cover a lot of this sort of information. So check that out if you haven't checked that out, and you'll get additional information because everything relates. Stomach, pancreas, all these different organs are working together. It's not like one viewing things in isolation. And if one doesn't work properly, it starts from the stomach, actually from the mouth onwards, your whole digestive tract really needs to be properly regulated. The key regulator for all these sort of things is taurine. It's the critical ingredient, and then there's a whole lot of others that play secondary role in making sure that all these things work properly. Anyway, not an accurate measure, but a good start. being a technical person like me, I'd have to agree with that, Richard. Yes, I like to measure things precisely.
I mean,
You come,
I come
go
from
ahead.
the chemistry background, so yeah, when I want to measure something, it better be exact.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, coming from my own field, we have to measure data precisely, which is sort of, I think, because Richard is in a technical field, we all sort of come from an engineering type background where precision measurements and all that are required in our work. Anyway, supplementing with creatine, any additional benefits for those already on animal diets or carnivore? Also, if so, when to take it, timing, and what about water retention and bloating? Look, it does actually hold on to water, and obviously bodybuilders like to use it to sort of pump to make their muscles look bigger. But it does help also with energy itself. So creatine phos is required. So when you get that phosphate from the ATP to combine it with creatine, then that actually powers up those filaments. It provides the required glucose to power those. And without that, it's a sort of an interlinked system. So by taking a bit of creatine, it can actually have it can enhance performance or keep you going for a bit longer. Taurine does something similar by reducing oxidative stress. So it actually allows you to perform for longer. This is in the mitochondria, the oxidative stress we're talking about. So there's that side of things. But it also, like taurine, it also has a mild myostatin inhibition. So it lowers myostatin. So it allows you to build bigger muscles in a sense. As I said, creatine is one of those things. It has both its upside and downside. It seems to have more upside than downside. But for the general carnivore community or the general carnivores, I don't see any real benefit unless you're doing bodybuilding and stuff like that, unless you're actually doing a lot of, you're into a lot of sports. I can justify it then under those circumstances. But for non-sports people, it's just an expensive supplement, pretty much. Unless it's for vanity purposes, just to make your muscles bulge a bit more. Don't know. Everybody's got their whatever gets them going or they like. What's your take on it? Well, I drink a bit of contraindicated fluid over here.
I mean, maybe if it's for show, it can have some salt water with creatine, but I don't really see much of a benefit if you're already eating a lot of meat.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that.
yeah. And that's a good point that you made actually, because it does have some synergies with salt as well as sodium
Yep.
in particular. So yes, so I know that some people will salt their meat and then they'll also, or salted water, and they'll have their creatine
Yep.
that way.
Mhm.
So you can get a bit more benefits that way. Darcy Sue C Tam, how are you? It's been a while. Is taurine useful for dissipate or reducing fibrosis in all organs? Yes, I've made that quite clear. It's what's helped me, but it's not going to happen overnight. So it's not, I'm taking taurine for a month and it's going to solve, nah. It takes a number of years to do it. So it took me about a decade to eliminate my fibrosis in my heart. And that was mild fibrosis, not severe fibrosis, because I had like a mild heart attack. Like I didn't pass out. I was shortness of breath. I nearly passed out. So I had a a mild heart episode, as they call it, or so it wasn't like a like a severe heart attack of a severe angina sort of issue that could potentially kill you. But it was, it's possibly that I sitting down and sort of relaxing and sort of calming myself down at the time probably avoided the worst. My cardiologist sort of said, maybe. He wasn't sure. You can't be sure about these things. Could it have been worse or whatever? So it does depend on the level of fibrosis and as well, how long it'll take to heal and all that. But yes, it has that antifibrotic effect. Obviously, if you're doing a whole lot of other things that you shouldn't be doing that are causing fibrosis, well, you can't counteract continuous damage either. So we need to be realistic about that. So if you're looking at another person in the family, not yourself, who are doing a lot of contraindicated things, what it may do is not fix those problems, but prevent them from getting worse. So, take your pick. Mike Woodsell said that bulletproof coffee in the morning raises his triglycerides. Thoughts? Probably does. Probably does. Why wouldn't it do it? What does coffee do? What does it raise? Which hormone does it raise? I know Lukey knows this one.
Wait a second. Is that cortisol? Yep.
What does cortisol do in the morning?
Oh, dawn effect. So it will raise triglycerides and blood sugar as well.
Exactly. So yes, it will. So you're actually amplifying cortisol effect in the morning, the dawn effect. That's all you're doing. That's why, yes, it will raise get out, export more triglycerides, which will end up as free fatty acids flowing through, and the glycerol backbone will be then used from those triglycerides. So your trigs will go up. It's like when you do a lot of exercise, your trigs go up. So does your blood sugar. It's all, it's that stress hormone effect, the cortisol signaling from the exercise and all that, and saying, well, we need more energy. Get this guy going. So we're going to push out some glucose. We're going to push out some free fatty acids. So, what's the energy storage? Well, around the adipose tissue. Let's get the triglycerides out so we can provide the materials in terms of free fatty acids and glycerol backbone for gluconeogenesis, for extra glucose. And when you don't have as much insulin, because you've got an insulin to glucagon of 1.3, when you're in a low carb state, you don't have the suppressive effect. So even glucose will rise a bit more because glucagon is tempering down insulin, preventing it. And that's okay. It's supposed to happen that way. Because if you're exercising, the body's going, I don't really know how much this person really needs. So I'm going to produce just a bit more than the basal level. Why? Because they may need it. I want to make sure that they've got enough in the system. That's what the body does. It's smart in that regard. This is why we say to people, if you're testing your blood sugars or whatever, stuff like that, once you've done exercise or whatever, you're going to get poor readings. You've got to get basal readings. That means being sedentary or being calm, or like all readings have to be at non-activity level. That's how you measure. You measure blood pressure when you're completely calm and you haven't done any exercise. You haven't drank coffee to raise your cortisol or your blood pressure. You've done nothing of this. The best thing is when you wake up in the morning and about 11ish, when cortisol comes down and all that, that's when you do those checks. If you have to do a test or do anything, don't eat until then and do it around that time. You're going to get a much better reading, a more honest reading. Okay. Relying on Google. Fair enough. Whatever. Plants. Does muscle meat have all the nutrients we need? Do we need to eat nose to tail? Not necessarily. It depends how deficient you are. If you're deficient, you've come in from uh, let's say a vegan diet or a plant-based diet that tends to have very little animal foods in it, and you've been doing it for uh, possibly at least 6 months to a year or more, you will have sustained some level of deficiencies. So it may be a good idea to consume some organ meats for a period of time to fix up the deficiencies. So there's good evidence in that. Terry Walls, who had multiple sclerosis, um, things like that, and couldn't get out of her what do you call those zero G seats or whatever that she used to sit in, and she had to wheelchair herself around. Now she's on bikes doing marathons or cycling and stuff like that. Yeah. So I mean, what did she do? She ate organ meats quite a lot to get a lot of nutrient density. She doesn't do that as much now. So that really helped because she was highly deficient in nutrients. And maybe genetically she was predisposed, but not like hardwired, where it's much more difficult to turn off those or downregulate those genes. And so she responded quite well to a dietary intervention of increasing the nutrient density. But somebody who's fairly healthy, doing pretty well, that you can get everything you need from muscle meat. The body will take all the amino acids and actually create the essential amino acids, anything you like, build, construct enzymes and whatever else. And there's enough cofactors in those animal foods. What I usually encourage people to do is to vary their, like eat different varied animal foods. You're going to get much better nutrient profile, all that. So obviously people will say, well, Harry, don't you recommend taurine to regulate ions and even that research you talk about in the Gaza Strip, where they were giving the young girls taurine supplementation to ameliorate, to sort out their anemia, and it sort of did, yes, because taurine has that little magical thing to do in the kidneys where it can actually either force the excretion, or through the gallbladder, force the excretion out of certain ions, certain metals, certain, minerals, or reabsorption of others. It's homeostasis of a lot of the stuff. And so you can get away with less, in a sense, because of the taurine in the animal food if you eat sufficient animal food. So if you undereat protein, then you're going to have problems. But if you're eating about 25 to 30%, you should get enough, in particular 30%. I usually recommend around 30%. Then you should get enough to basically regulate your ions and a whole lot of other things. And also remember the B vitamins, you get more than enough. And they too tend to stay in the system for about 3 days. I see people on carbohydrate metabolism that actually burn through B vitamins and stuff like that. It's the reason why when people I say you had a little, let's say we're knocking down a few drinks, what are you through your detox pathways in your liver? What are you using? You're burning through choline and B vitamins. You're burning through them like there's no tomorrow. If you take some B vitamins, you don't get a hangover the next day. Voila, voila. because you've cleared out the toxins much more efficiently. And so it has less of an effect. If you've got less B vitamins, well, there again, eating a species appropriate diet will get the stuff. But I usually say to people, vary. Add some eggs, eat different types of meats as well. Even though, yes, I know thiamine, we only need half of the amount compared to somebody on a carbohydrate diet. Because of the enzyme pathways, you only need half energy production from either protein, which we don't use unless you're starving, or fatty acids. There is cases where, Elliot's done with some people, even though I'm a bit critical of, sort of a blanket statement that thiamine is great for everyone. There are cases where certain people have certain severe deficiencies and and it seems to fix their problems. Mega dose for a short period of time. Or as I say to other people on the carnivore diet, you can eat a bit more tuna and piggy and get the extra thiamine because it's one of the best sources, especially piggy. So I don't like beef. I can tell you, I don't mind a bit of beef, but I'm not a big beef fan. I know it's going to upset a lot of people, but I don't give a shit. I love lamb. I love the taste of lamb because it's got that really nice earthy taste, and it's just the lamby flavor. I know some people don't like it. I love it. I love pork. So that's me. I find beef bland, uninteresting. I have to put butter on beef to make it tasty sometimes, or something else. So I'm I don't care. Shelley goes, good, more beef for us, Harry. Laugh out loud. You can have all the beef you like, Shelley. Yeah, I'm not. I don't mind patties. I like patties. I have to say, I do like beef patties, but I'm just not. I've never been a big. I just find it doesn't have the flavour, the enjoyment. I think the thing that I actually enjoy the most, the two things that I enjoy the most is, like lamb chops. I love lamb chops, and also bacon. Those two things. I could live on bacon and lamb chops all my life. So yeah. So look, lamb. You don't. If you're nutrient deficient, yes, those sort of things. But I think that if somebody, as I've said, also you can do like a vegetarian type approach, and like I call it a carnivore, vegetarian carnivore diet, and which is pretty much fish, crustaceans, eggs, and dairy sort of thing. So there are options for all sorts of people, whatever floats your boat and stuff like that. And you can get quite a lot of nutrition. Crustaceans have a lot of minerals. But then again, people can say, well, if you don't need as much minerals, what's going to happen? Well, your kidneys will excrete them if everything is working properly. So that's what they're supposed to do. I'm sort of on when it comes to certain nutrition, I still tell people, what did your ancestors consume? It's really important. That's where the genetics come in. It's a bit like myself, calcium, one of those 24%. So a muscle meat only diet for me would not work. If I did a muscle meat diet only, I would get small levels of arrhythmias, and I would get small amounts of, my heart rate goes up. So my heart rate, I've shown you guys before, when I'm exercising, it can be down to the mid 45 and all that, or 50. And usually if I'm not exercising, it sort of sits between 50 and 60. The moment I take out calcium, like I go dairy free, my serum calcium levels, because of my genetics, I can't absorb as well from the animal foods, the meat. And my heart rate goes up to between 70 and 90. So or sorry, 80 or 90. I know quite clear that I have a calcium genetic issue, and I found it in my genetics, the 23andMe information. So there will be, for proportion of the population, like the Irish with their carotenoid conversion. See, a lot of us can convert carotenoids very well. You can, from the animal fats, there's, grass-fed animal fats will have carotenoids. That's why it's yellowy. It's not only the DHA, the omega-3s, but also the carotenoids that give it that yellowy flavor, from white to the more yellowy flavor. But if you don't have, if most people from Africa and elsewhere can convert carotenoids that comes from grass easy. I have a 32% reduction, and Irish can have massively up to 80 plus, depending on, because there are some secondary genes as well that are playing a role. So if you take all that, some can be up to 90%. That means when they eat they go plant-based, their skin goes orange, because they just cannot deal with the carotenoids. Their body's trying to excrete it from every bloody orifice and get rid of it. So it's really important to realize these sort of things when it comes to it. So a steak-only diet would be fine for up to 70-odd% of the population. There's probably about 30% for a whole lot of reasons, genetic reasons, in the last 10,000 years of certain adaptations and all that it may not be sufficient. So we need to make sure we've got that proviso, that it's quite clear for the majority of carnivores to state that muscle meat is all you need is a valid thing, excluding people that have genetically been affected in the last 10,000 years. So in terms of, for somebody to argue like that our species have been consuming primarily muscle meats for thousands of years, that's true. I accept that completely, and I agree. But to state that there aren't exceptions in the last 10,000 years in the modern era because of certain adaptations to consuming certain types of animal foods that have, or not enough of certain animal foods that has changed the requirements, genetic requirements for certain substances, we need to be honest about that as well. And so most people do know when they take out certain things, they don't feel as good. So they haven't checked their genetics, but there's definitely something not working properly. And so through anecdotes, they realize, and sometimes they go through to the wrong things. They start trying to put carbs in, or other crap, stuff like that, to sort of mask the issue. Because, okay, you change some of the dynamics, or you hold on to more, if you're in a low carb state, you can lose more electrolytes unless you've got enough taurine. But if you're not supplementing taurine and you're under eating protein, and then you're eating carbs to sort of force the insulin effect to hold on to electrolytes, you're deceiving yourself thinking that that's fixing your problem. It's masking your problem. That's all it's doing. But when you eliminate, you understand that you may need certain substance, other animal foods that your ancestors have adapted to, and you bring those in, the problem goes away. And that's how you should deal with a problem, in the appropriate ancestral way, not in some dodgy way like, Saladino and others sort of promote to mask those symptoms. We know quite clearly this information. This is not new information. Walter Kempner back in the 1930s, and I did on the first video that I ever did with Pim Johnson on her channel. If you go and check the playlist of my chats with Pim, the first one is on the dietary rules and stuff like that. And I cover Walter Kempner's 1930 research showing the low fat and how he used to recommend that the people consume no electrolytes because of the water, of the insulin retentive effect of carbohydrates. You didn't need to. He just supplemented iron. But he knew that the diet wasn't sustainable beyond a year. You'd lose weight, it corrects certain things. Had he known about the keto diet, he could have used the same approach, without, but at the time he didn't. So, that was his approach, and it didn't disengage the Randall cycle, and it worked. So in that regard, but he knew it wasn't sustainable. He knew that people would fall apart if they didn't get animal foods back in and other things. It was a short-term thing it was like he recognized it being like a fasting mimicking diet, because that's what it really is. When somebody's on like doing fruitarian, it's really a fasting mimicking diet. It's the equivalent. And you're not getting enough energy to maintain, and you just tear down your body. You can do that for a certain amount of time, especially if you've got a lot of adipose tissue on and all that. But at some point, you'll fall into nutritional deficiencies, severe ones, and severe health problems as well. And we know that. We see that most vegans don't last for up to, probably 5 years, some even less, depending on how deficient they are going into the actual diet in the first place. That's why they don't last very long. And the ones that actually have a lot of nutrient density and go into it, they are able to last for a few years before they start suffering quite a bit. Yeah, there is a super chat. Yes. Oops. What is this doing? Just saw it. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it, mate. Thanks for the £10. Yeah, find my old spot. So what's happening in Brazil at the moment, Maluki?
So, interesting stuff. My state's governor has actually prohibited universities requesting vaccination status for anyone. I actually managed to get a physical copy of my diploma finally, because I could go there.
Oh, you can actually go now and get
a physical
copy. Freaking hell.
Yeah. So that's
so you were using it. You were using a photocopy because you couldn't.
Yeah, I was using like a virtually authenticated one whenever I needed it for something. But I just said, now that I can get it, I'll go get it. But yeah, it was just so stupid, and I went there, and you can still see some people wearing masks.
Oh, look, even in Hobart, there's people that are, you walk around and they've got these. Mm-hmm. Some of them have got those, the high end, like the what do they call it? I think they're called N95s, and they poke out like that, and it makes their face look like they're some sort of bloody alien thing. and they walk past you, and they sort of look at you because you're getting too close to them. They look at you in a very strange manner, and I go, okay, another weirdo. Keep going, weirdo. Keep going. So yeah, strange world. Dean.
besides that, Harry, I'm a bit fearful for the future because the economy is really, really weird. And I think food is bound to get really expensive like a year from now or so, even this year, you know. So
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people are very much concerned about a lot of these sort of things. Yeah. So I'm saying to people that they need to be very careful about a lot of these sort of things. You need to plan. You need to put aside a bit, so you can at least have some resources to fall onto when things become really bad. Because I don't see, this multipolar world. There's two different trade blocks emerging globally, or two spheres that are emerging, and it just seems like it's not going to get better. And I think in Western Europe in particular, or Europe in particular, it's going to be way worse than any other part of the world. I think Europe is heading for a massive collapse. I think it's a mess, that place. So look what's happening in France. What's happening in France is going to happen in greater intensity throughout the whole of Europe. This isn't going to end well for a number of countries. How bad will depend on a lot of things, but yeah, it's not looking good. I'm a bit worried as well about not so much about where I'm at in Tasmania. Things are pretty okay here because higher the energy costs, it's more expensive to export the produce that we produce, and we produce excessive amounts. So it actually may end up becoming cheaper in the Tasmanian market, for the simple reason that we've only got 500,000 population in the whole state. It's a massive state, and at the same time, there's a lot of resources, and if you can't export them, well, you have to consume them domestically, don't you? Locally. That means the price comes down. So we've had cases in the past where there's been issues with transportation and all that, and things have been given away at very low prices because they can't get rid of them. We had like with the COVID period, there were fishermen going out and getting a whole lot of different fish products, but you were getting things like oysters really cheap. The price had literally dropped to a quarter. You're getting crayfish, big crayfish like that, massive crayfish, and you were paying about a fifth of the price because they couldn't get them to China. They couldn't get them to Asia to export them. They were dirt cheap. I mean, I went and bought a couple and threw them in the deep freezer so I could eat, And we talk about, top sort of stuff. So I'm probably in a safer location in that regard, in terms of the food issues when it comes to energy. Also, Tasmania produces a lot of its own hydropower and stuff like that. So we've got we're not too bad on that front. Yeah, there could be some issues there, but it's not going to be dramatic. We could always cut off the connection between us and the other part of Australia, so we keep all the energy to ourselves. So there's there's that option. It's not looking as bad for places like Tasmania. Probably New Zealand would be another place, and all that. I think the biggest issue in New Zealand at the moment is some of these radical lunatics that are trying to push some similar policies like they're doing in the Netherlands with animal agriculture and the fertilizers and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's where there's some issues there. It's not as bad here in Australia, luckily. It's because we've got a state-based system of federation, and it's really hard to push that because you're going to have the premiers are going to say bugger off, you don't have a right. So the federal government can't enforce these things because the state governments are responsible for these, and the state governments are very much local industries has quite a lot of influence. The state governments are going to say, well, they're going to balk at it, and constitutionally it's a state government purview to deal with regulating foods and stuff like that within the state itself, so they can't very easily impose certain things of that sort, and pretty much it'd be a shit fight. So it's the reason why it's not being pushed as hard by the current government, the federal government, the Labor government. So the lefties here sort of holding back, but they're still trying. Don't get me wrong, but they're not pushing as hard because it's not as easy. But in other parts of the world, yes, it's definitely a problem, and that's going to exacerbate the issue. Energy, food insecurity, all these things are just going to make things worse. These people are lunatics, so yes, so it's not looking good. And also North America, so you got a basket case there situation. Now you've got Biden has forced, or to be more precise, rammed through a piece of legislation to force sort of pension funds over there to go woke. So all I can say is to my American friends, you need to get out there. And my 401 looks better. I lost my 50K since Biden took over. Yep. So that's Shelley. Just reading what she just put up. Yeah, it's all these sort of things. And I think you have to go to the company that you deal with for to tell them that they need to, that you want to opt out of that sort of option or whatever, or tell them that, no, you're not interested in that sort of nonsense. Why would you want to have investments in companies that are not making you money? I mean, really? I mean, the world's going in like a hell in a handbasket. Things are going to hell. And these people want to literally, make things more expensive and worse, and also damage people's investments. God almighty. I'm consuming a sweet potato a day as the only carb source. Any chance of developing scurvy higher than if I didn't consume those carbs? There is a potential risk because when you're in a low carb state, you take in glucose at a basal level through GLUT1 receptor. That means the GLUT4 receptor is only an insulin-driven receptor. So that means the small amount of vitamin C you're getting from the animal foods, you can push that through there with no problems. But if you eat carbohydrates, even a small amount, you can derange. You can force up slightly insulin, force all your glucose then to go through the GLUT4 receptor. And if it's going through that, it's inhibiting the small amount of vitamin C potentially. I'm not saying it's going to cause it, because we did see that cooked meat consumed by Napoleon soldiers that were still having some carbohydrates still cured their scurvy. But could it potentially be a risk for some people with certain genetics? I don't know. See, we've never done these experiments to know. So there is a potential risk. And I can't prove a risk, is what I'm saying. But, it's a risk if you're prepared to take. You'll know you've got scurvy, because I've actually shown it in the past what scurvy looks like. You get all these sort of derangements of collagen throughout your whole body, including your skin. You get breakouts, all sorts of breakouts, strange, like pimple type things and outbreaks all over your skin and discolorations of your skin and stuff like that. You'll know you've got scurvy. That's what real scurvy is, not what other people imagine. Oh, I've got some bleeding gums. That can happen for a whole lot of reasons.
When I eat cooked meat, I get scurvy.
Napoleon used cooked meat on his troops who were also eating carbs and cured their scurvy. Oh, yeah, whatever.
Wasn't there at some point, I think, Stephenson, he spent a year eating pemmican?
Yeah. Well, he was eating.
It has fruits, like dried fruits.
Look, he was eating both raw and cooked meats at different times. So nothing was actually recorded properly in terms of how much cooked and how much raw he was consuming. Now, I consume some raw animal foods as well because I like them, but I'm not saying that you have to prevent scurvy. That would be insane, or that if you have a bit of carbohydrate, that's gonna cause scurvy. I can't prove it, but is there potential risk in some? There may be a small population group that may have that risk because for the simple reason that just the way their genetics work, there's a potential. Because we haven't done the research, we've only looked at people that are eating dried biscuits on chips and plants because only the officers didn't get scurvy and they ate both fresh meat and also dried meat, which they took over, and they didn't suffer scurvy. No, they were having dried meat, not severely dried, but yeah. So definitely the meat made the difference. And we've never really teased out. So we know that meat itself has hydroxyproline and hydroxylysine. And we know that vitamin C is required to turn proline and lysine into to put a hydroxyl group and turn it into these collagen amino acids. So if you're eating these collagen amino acids, do you really need vitamin C? Is there a requirement even to zero? These experiments have never been done. And as long as you haven't done experiments, you can never be 100% certain. But you can say one thing, that they have measured. I mean, Germans have done some really good measurements, some not at the USDA, but in Germany, where they've looked at meats, cooked meats and all that, they've actually found there is vitamin C even after it's cooked. So that's definitely the case, that there is still vitamin C there, not with pasteurized milk, but definitely with meats. And so if you're in a low state, it seems even small amounts that seem to prevent the problem. And we know that as I said, with Napoleon's troops, they all reversed their scurvy with cooked meat. So I have to reconcile thousands of people that have got scurvy, soldiers, then to eat cooked meat and resolve their problems, and then people claiming certain things. And I'm going, well, we've actually had a population level experiment here with Napoleon's soldiers. I think I'd go with that population study that actually shows quite clearly, things inverse relationship, rather than your claims with zero proof. My anecdotal, I've had an epiphany. Yes, you've had a brain fart, is the way I describe those people. Yes, unfortunately, there's quite a few of these so-called carnivore gurus, or animal, as they call themselves, animal-based gurus nowadays, that have no idea whatsoever.
Look, I didn't even say any names, but people got the idea of who I was talking about with my imitation.
Yes. Bruce, thanks for the $10, mate. Do you have any resources for pet health regarding protocols for tumors, regarding natural healing methods, nutrition, holistic measures? Sadly, Bigfoot is after our pet friends and we must fight them. Oh, big food. So Bigfoot. God. Anyway, food, big food. Well, they do have Bigfoot over there in America. Yeah, I know. It's a Freudian slip, as they call it. Maybe I shouldn't tell people in America other things about them. I may offend. It's comical that I may offend. I have some views about New Yorkers, may offend them as well, so I better be careful. I say to some of my American friends, but I won't say it on the YouTube here, just in case some New Yorker hears it and and gets upset so much that they go and complain to Google.
Even though the New Yorkers probably deserve it.
Possibly. So many other Americans would have that opinion, and also they would have that opinion about Californians. We'll leave it at that. No wonder they're all leaving. I actually heard one comment about the Californians, why they actually are leaving, because there's so much funny money over there, and there's overinflated. You're either on the street or property is extremely expensive. And what they're doing is, some people are saying, middle class people are going, this is turning into a shithole with all the way the politicians are behaving and all that. And so somebody may have like median prices about $898 or nearly $900,000. They flog off a place like that. They probably end up with $300,000 to $400,000 after, as equity, after they've been paying for a number of years, and they've had the capital gains and all that. And I don't know the laws in America. In Australia, if it's your primary home, you don't pay capital gains on it. You just have to change your primary home every now and then whenever you want to sell one of your properties. That's not legal advice, and it's not tax advice either. Just let me make that quite clear. And so what happens is, we've got a situation where people are going, well, I don't want this debt, especially in the current situation. Sell one place, they go to another place in America, in the South, where they can buy a place for about $300,000 to $400,000, debt free. The place is less woke. It's got more job opportunities because they're less crazy about restricting everything. And people have got more options. They can buy a bit of land, and so they can grow things, and so it makes it a bit easier for them in the long run. So anyway, so that's what they're doing. Now back to Bruce, after he has given me a bit of dosh to explain. Now, obviously, the current food crap that is sold by these big food companies, you definitely have to get rid of that. Animals need to be eating raw meat or organ meats as well, a bit of organ meats. It's particular because they don't really synthesize well certain substances, so they do eat organs. You don't want too much organs, so it's about, I think Pim gives her dogs about a third organs, and the rest is pretty much the flesh of the animal. So that's what I would focus on. Now, if the animal's got tumor, the quickest way to get rid of a tumor is with deuterium depleted water. So the protocol that works for the cancer protocol, it will work also for dogs as well. So they use DDW in Europe. DDW, it's not being used anywhere else other than Europe, which is registered by the European Union. So it's actually a registered supplement for dogs with cancer. Now, It works much better with dogs, not with cats. And the reason for that is because cats don't produce taurine endogenously, or very little, where dogs produce slightly more than us. So it actually works. The deuterium depleted water works on the dogs. For humans, we need to take taurine, combine it. That's why the protocol of deuterium depleted water doesn't work as well as some people promote it, because they don't realize you need both the taurine, the synergies. So you need the melatonin and taurine to heal the actual, so blue blocking and all that sort of stuff, to heal the mitochondria, so you can reactivate sufficient ATP production to turn off the oncogenes, downregulate them, and stuff like that. Yeah, mix your taurine in with deuterium depleted water, basically, is what you want to do. So that's how you deal with dog tumors, and you'll enhance it that way. Obviously, dogs, just deuterium depleted water will work on them, but I would recommend, and this is my personal opinion, I would recommend adding additional taurine in to accelerate the whole thing. So, and it'll cost you less in the long run, let's put it that way. I'd also feed the dog a bit far more animal fat. So, and the reason for that is you want the dog to get more low deuterium sources of energy. One, to dilute their own, because they're probably, like humans, probably accumulated in their fat cells some higher levels of deuterium, and you want to lower that level. Yes. Went down the wrong way. Oh, damn. Choked myself on screen. Anyway. Oops. Now find my old spot. It's one thing I wish StreamYard had, like, an option to be able to go back to the previous spot. Maybe that's the next comment I should put in there. Yes, I think so. It's always a struggle with him, getting him to do things in the proper way. Anyway. I didn't realize how far behind I am. God almighty. I'm very inefficient today. Absolutely very inefficient. Okay. G'day, Gary. How are you, mate? Hi, Harry and everyone. I've successfully taken most of the chronic stress out of my life by quitting my hospital job. I'm actually having fun at work. At a school, less stress is a piece of health. It is. It definitely is. Stress is one of those big damaging things to your body. I'm glad, you within that medical system, especially through the COVID period, we had a lot of chats on Zoom, and I know it was a bloody struggle for you. Yeah. So I suspect now you're back from France. You had a good holiday, which was good. I hope that everything went well on that front as well. Chat with you next time when I get a chance. Okay. Yes, unfortunately, Dean, that is the case. Both Australia and New Zealand are really moving towards the nutty, loony future. Anyway, we'll go. Let's just hit these. My ferritin is over 400, hemochromatosis, and also heavy oxalate dumping 6 months into carnivore. Does iron play a role in oxalate, and would I benefit from bloodletting? You know what the biggest issue is? For hemochromatosis people, iron metabolism. So ferritin levels are not a big problem, because if you've got if you're, it's really when your others, like your trans ferritin and other things are on the high as well. So ferritin is a safe storage of iron, of heme iron. What I get concerned with hemochromatosis people is free iron and some of the other subfractions, the other areas, which is the transfer areas of iron, which I get concerned if they're elevated. Now, what's the best thing that actually regulates the homeostasis? It's taurine. What does oxalate do? It depletes taurine. It depletes all sulfur in the body. That's the problem. What is happening is you're depleting your sulfur levels in your body, and in particular taurine, and you're struggling to regulate your ions, but in particular, when it comes to heme iron in the body. So you need to supplement with taurine. Do check. I do have a playlist with taurine, and I cover a lot of this sort of stuff. And I have done a video also on iron in regards to taurine and its relationship and how it regulates its homeostasis. So if it's too high, it brings it down. If it's too low, it brings it up. It sort of keeps it within the certain physiological range. Really, really important. I'm just going to hit the questions now, so avoid everything so we can get through this. What are your thoughts on donating blood? Not an issue if you want to do it. It's a good cause and all that. Yes, you can bring your iron levels down that way, and it also helps out the community, so it's a good thing to do. So I would recommend it as a community thing, not as a health thing. With a species appropriate diet, you should be able to regulate things much better, and using that stuff. What are the other benefits? Many. I could be here for an hour or two telling you every single. Just think of it as a Swiss Army knife in the body, and it regulates everything you can think of. There's actually a taurine playlist, covers a lot of things, and there's more to come. Anyway. Yep. Yes, and that is exactly, thank you, Richard. Anyway, one from Lukey. Denise Minga highlighted an experiments in which subjects fasted overnight, had a cup of cream, causing the blood to become cloudy and angina. Can this be summed up to Randall cycle activation? More than likely. That's what it was. These people are sad dieters, remember, that they did this on. It'd be Randall. Yeah. I've seen something similar. Where even the experiment where they did, on the what was that, Game Changers, that stupid video,
yes,
where they gave them the different burgers and stuff like that,
the burritos and stuff,
little burritos. That's it. Now, obviously, when you engage the Randall cycle, and we know that this happens severely. We know the insulin to glucagon for somebody just eating a steak only is 1.3. For fasting, just to give you reference for other people that haven't heard this before, for reference is 0.8. That means there's 0.8 insulin to 1 glucagon. Or there's 1.3 insulin to 1 part of glucagon secretion. That's the ratio. When you eat a potato diet, like a low-fat diet, it's 4-1. Slightly higher insulin to glucagon. But you still got glucagon there. You can still basically upregulate AMPK. You can still basically, lose body fat at a 4-1. But when you eat a highly processed food like a McDonald's burger with fries and a Coke and stuff like that, or juice, your insulin to glucagon can go up to 70-1. Basically, glucagon is nowhere to be seen, and insulin is sky high. And what does that do? What is insulin resistance? It's basically severe activation of the Randall cycle. It's a construct explaining what is happening, the retention of all these energy substrates in the bloodstream with not enough cells out there wanting to uptake that stuff. And obviously, because it's not being cleared, because there is an enzymatic, you need to push that through your liver. The liver can only do so much work per hour in getting that stuff down. So it's going to take some level of hours to clear that out. So what's the cloudiness? Well, that. But you know what the game changers didn't point out? That when they ate, and this is eating a mixed burger with meat in it. If you notice at the top tip, one was cloudy. That's the Randall cycle, stuff staying in the system, not being uptaken by the cells. That's that right, Randall cycle activation. But if you took a close look at the cloudy one, it had a smaller white zone on top. The vegan one had a bigger white bit on top.
Okay.
Well, what's that?
What is that? Stuff, white blood cells?
Exactly. And what does that tell you?
Oh, it was reacting to the food.
Exactly. Reacting to the food and causing inflammation. So pretty much, yes, you weren't getting, because you weren't engaging the Randall cycle, but you were getting inflammation from the food because you had more of the plant compounds that are toxic that create inflammation in a different mechanism.
Sure.
And that, and it actually even worse, was creating more inflammation compared to the mixed.
Wow.
Exactly.
Okay, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. Yes, they didn't point that out. As I said, I'm a details person. I observe every detail, and that's why I pick out people's stupid little arguments, because I'm a details person. I notice. That's why you notice when I'm talking, I'm always nuancing the little things here and there, because everything's interconnected. No? But most people, it just goes over their head. They don't even, because they're not observant. They're not looking. Look at what they're presenting, not what they're saying. What they're saying is propaganda. As I say, don't listen to what people are saying. Look at what they're doing. That gives you a way, really. Yeah. So there's a lot of propaganda. Host Transit, thank you, mate. Now, get all the way down there. Oops. 19.99 US dollars. Thank you very much. Shout out Harry and team. What protocol would you recommend for 7-day water fast, fighting H. pylori already, using 1 gram of taurine, that's not enough, per day, and 50 milligrams of vitamin B6? Should I add leucine, carnosine as well to replenish gut? I mean, those things are going to help in an indirect way, but ultimately you need to go much higher on the taurine. I mean, 10, 12 grams, stuff like that. Much higher, but I can't recommend that. I can only recommend between 6 for normal people, for, up to 10, because the sort of the studies with the animals and stuff like that. But, think higher. Like, what did Harry do? He sort of was doing 20. But you go slowly, you build up to that sort of level. But I can't recommend that, obviously. Not allowed to. But, yeah, just think you can go to those higher levels. Got one friend doing, Lamo, he's doing about 35 now. Sorting out all his issues, he's going. Obviously, some people do react. They need choline to deal with the excess sulfur because they can't clear out sulfur in a well way. Bart's one of those people. And usually, if you can't handle things like sulfur-rich foods like eggs and onions and stuff like that, you definitely know you've got a sulfur problem. You can't metabolize sulfur properly or clear it out properly. And those sort of people then you're not going to be forcing it out of the kidneys in an efficient way. So those people will need pretty much to force it out of the bile. Get rid of it in a number of different ways, detox it, sort of break it down and get rid of in that regard. Not that it's a toxin, but you know what I mean. Break it down through your liver and remove it in that and try and So that's where choline plays a role with sulfur. Some people just have these issues. Bart's one of them. So he can't handle eggs at all. Yeah, I think he'll have one egg now and then, but he ends up farting like mad and all that. Let's put it this way: Pim's not happy. So he still takes taurine, but in a much less amount because he knows there are benefits in it. So anyway, so pretty much, I have done a video on the stomach, and the biggest problem with H. pylori is that H. pylori tries to prevent the proton pumps from working properly. It's trying to keep, the pH high, not low. And most people end up with a pretty much a higher pH, which is the biggest problem. So you really need to suppress it. You also need to consider taking the L-reuteri. So if you go and check my videos, if Lukey, you don't mind putting that L-reuteri supplement in the chat, so get that as well. You need to do that for about 6 months because that actually suppresses a lot of the pathogenic bacteria, including H. pylori. Together with that, and that also you should consider a HCl. So you need to, try and get your acidity up because H. pylori is trying to fight acidity because it likes an alkaline environment. So you need to basically try and suppress that. And so that would be a good way. I don't like taking antibiotics because antibiotics are sort of like a last thing because sometimes what we've found is antibiotics are causing a lot of the H. pylori to become resistant to antibiotics and become even more hard to deal with. So we want to do it with the taurine. We want to do it with something to increase the to lower the pH, to increase the acidity in the stomach, because that will really bring it under control and suppress it. And so I have covered part of that in a video called on stomach. So if you go under the digestive issues, I cover stomach issues in regards to these sort of issues. So there's a video that covers that. But I would definitely try and get my acidity down, up, and my pH down as a consequence. So the more acidic your stomach becomes, the higher that has a natural suppressive effect against H. pylori. Taurine regulates the proton pumps and also suppresses directly, H. pylori, and this supplement also helps that Lukey's looking for, and he'll put in the chat shortly. That also helps in dealing with this process. And and water fasting. Water fasting isn't going to, and that's correct. Yes, and I think I've said that before anyway. Water fasting isn't going to sort out the problem. So in that regard, not going to help. Thanks, Necrokitty, but we need the link so the guy can actually go directly to it, because that actually has a suppressive effect against it. Now, if you're doing a water fast, for other reasons, every 3 days I'd be taking a B complex. So, and the one that I recommend is the one on iHerb, which is the Paradise one, Paradise Natures or something like that it's called. And that one is actually got the levels appropriately, and it has, it has methylfolate, and it doesn't have the the cyanide type B12, which we don't want. So it's a much better sort of supplement, that one, for those purposes. And usually it's like every 3 days, because it usually you need B vitamins still as cofactors. Even the guy that actually did the long fasting for a whole year or whatever, he was still taking electrolytes, B vitamins and stuff like that to maintain, because you still need cofactors for the body to work, because enzymes require cofactors of micronutrients. So very important. And they didn't want, because they knew he had some level of deficiencies, they didn't want him to basically lose bone mass or anything like that, giving up some of these minerals. So that's why they supplemented him at the time, which was the right way of doing it. And Shelley's right that, yeah, pretty much you need to get the animal foods in, because the animal foods are going to increase the acidity in the stomach, and that acidity is going to eventually, suppress and kill off these nasty bacteria. We want to make it a very hostile environment, but you may need initially to use HCl to increase the acidity. You may need to get a sort of pepsin as well, those sort of things, because your production in endogenous production is much poorer. So you need to get these supplemental things and use them for a period of time, for a couple of months, to sort out and get your stomach functioning properly again. And so we're on the last half an hour, so definitely behind on a lot of things. But that's nothing new. That's normal on the Harry Serpanos show. That's why you got to get your questions in really early. Believe me, if you want them answered, you really have to get them in really early. So it's just the way it goes, guys, because I like to give people comprehensive answers. And so, yep. Thank you, George. Yes, 25th was yesterday, 25th of March. So, which is the independence, sort of, it's sort of started earlier, about 23rd, and it was 25th, sort of the official, when it was the sort of the Friendship Society of Greece, as it was called. Sort of, it was the set date for the rebellion. But anyway, but the incident started a bit earlier, or some of the actual preparations and all that. So, but anyway, thank you, George. Yes. Yes, and definitely hit that like button. Otherwise, I'll send Ted around and he'll molest you forever. That's what Bart should say. But then again, there's a downside. Some people may like a bit of molestation from Ted. That's the only problem, the downside with that. I'll deliberately hit the unlike button to get that. Bob, thoughts on seasonal eating of fruit during wet season? Tribal folks eat fruit, and during summer, folk eat carbs and stuff like that. Look, they did, and they still do. A number of tribal people, they still do that. Like the Hadza and a few others. So it's not that they don't. But if you look at the Maasai I've done a video on the Maasai, and they've got a lot of people that are living into the hundreds and beyond, having much better outcomes and robustness, which is critical. A lot of people, some people do age, they've got a lot of longevity genes, and they can actually stay around for longer, but they still got a lot of issues, and they're not, like at peak, well robust performance. They're slowly into the last, beyond the 100 years. They may last for another 20 or 10 or 15, but it's usually all downhill. Where you see the Maasai and people like that, they usually just drop dead. or as they call it, they go to sleep and they never wake up. So no more cell division is what it's called. But they still have some level of robustness in them. That's the difference. So they have long, healthy lifespan. And the reason for that is because they have a low deuterium diet and very healthy, low stress, a lot of things that actually work for them. Plus, they consume quite a lot of animal foods. They don't consume any plants. And the ones, the small amount that do, because they sometimes marry, some of them do marry outside the Maasai tribe, and some of the women in particular, they don't live as long, and they still bring some of their other tribal customs, and they're allowed. Maasai men are not allowed, but some of the women that come from other tribes are allowed to consume some of their original foods, because they have this sort of saying, the Maasai, that their god gave them the animal foods. The other tribe gave them plants, and the other tribe gave them hunting. And so they've reconciled these differences between the groups in a religious way. And so the Maasai themselves are, dairy and meat, primarily meat and some dairy. But on the other hand, because they do take wives from other tribal groups, they respect their tribal customs. That's the small percentage where they say, oh, some of these people, Maasai, like 30 odd percent or this percent, have arthritis. It must be the milk. No, it's not. It's the grains that those people are eating, that 30% or less, those people that come from other tribal groups. And they've just married into the Maasai. But they are allowed by their tribal law to keep those customs because they come from that other group. So we need to understand this. It's all nuance. That's why I say people miss the details, because if the milk was causing, the milk should cause everyone those arthritic problems, a bit like the lectins in wheat causes everyone joint issues, everyone, no exception. It's a dose dependent, and it's actually mechanistically proven. There's never been a mechanistic study to prove a direct causal link between milk and arthritis. Never. It's all associated claptrap. And if it was causal, there should be no inverse, especially a 70% inverse relationship over a lifetime of drinking of milk. It's just nonsense. Makes no logical sense. So it's just associated with 30% of the Maasai for that reason. So no, you do not need, as Bart would say, not even a gram, not even a spick, or nothing in terms of that sort of stuff. Now, our ancestors in the glacial periods consumed a lot of fat. That's how they maintained their body fat, by consuming, gorging for days, sometimes after a big kill. And that's how they maintained themselves in the less prosperous periods. Today, these people just, because since the glacial periods, we're in an interglacial period, animals lean out, become less lean. Become more lean. And so they've got less fat storage. So you can't get enough fat to maintain your own fat stores. Because when you eat fat, a bit of it goes to adipose tissue. But when you're not eating, you basically use it as energy. But if you were consuming very little, and you were sometimes not getting a good hunt on a couple of days, you had a couple of days and all that, you're getting 20, 48 hours of, having to burn away your own body fat. It won't take long before you're in starvation mode. So it's a good strategy to actually use plants in that sort of environment where you don't have guaranteed food supply every day. It's a good strategy to use fruit and that to engage the Randall cycle and add some fat, because fructose inhibits the proper functioning of mitochondria. And as a consequence, it forces the Krebs cycle into reverse and forces all these growth pathways to actually add adipose tissue rapidly. That's the thing. That's why they go for the fruit and they go for the honey and stuff like that, because it actually builds up their fat stores for a rainy day. That's all it is, Bob. We don't have that problem. We can get a steak every day. They can't necessarily. And so that's the difference. We've got, let's say if the lovely people of the World Economic Forum have their way, we may all have issues of starvation and issues of under eating. Then we may all need to engage the Randall cycle occasionally to maintain our fat stores and our energy stores. That may be a future, yes, a potential future situation that may arise that may force us to approach things a bit differently. Yes.
You will engage the Randall cycle and you will be happy.
Yes, Klaus. Precisely. I'd say gallbladder issues more likely than nothing else would cause that. It's a giveaway, actually. Nausea is one of the biggest giveaways that your gallbladder's not working properly. It's not only diarrhea and stuff like that, but nausea is the big one. And I can tell you, when I was dealing with my gallbladder issues, I had severe nausea where I even felt on occasions of wanting to throw up. That's how bad it got. So, yeah, I know what you're feeling, and I felt worse. Yes, too many plants for far too long, and then our gallbladders don't work properly. No wonder everybody's losing their gallbladders in the Western world. Yes. Babs, how are you, mate? Do you primarily eat pork? No. Should you eat pork that is fed more naturally? Yeah, generally speaking, yes. On the Discord, there was a super duper Roy Petard dishing poofer. Okay, so what was that all about?
It's a random rape beat inspired guy showed up on our server.
Okay.
It was the usual, oh, the poof was killing you, and here's a bunch of studies about how it causes or hormonal dysregulations and oxidative stress.
Did anybody point out to this cockwomble that it's seed oil?
Yep. Yeah, but the guy was just saying that it's the same. He said all those things about the Okinawans, about the Polynesians, and
exactly,
how poof from animals is not oxidized.
Exactly.
And that on a carnivore diet, you upregulate endogenous antioxidants.
And it's also low in deuterium.
Yep.
So your mitochondria work better. So some of those symptoms that some of these studies claim are due to a number of things. One, the deuterium causing damage to the mitochondria of these animals that are in the studies. Two, you've got actually a lot of fructose in there, maltodextrose and other things like that are put in there that also are inhibiting mitochondrial function. Okay. These are so confounded, these studies, they're beyond a joke. Yes. Yeah, the repeat brigade is, crazy.
I remember now there was like a study saying that lard was really bad for thyroiditis in mice. But then I looked at their diet and it was like a lard with a bunch of cornmeal. And
yep.
Is it really the lard that's doing anything?
Precisely. Yeah. And it's also got seed oils as well. What they call there's what is the high fat chow.
Yes.
If you take a look at the high fat chow, this is what they do the experiments on everyone, on every animal. I forget the number now. There's a specific code for it. This high fat chow, what has it got in it? It's got a small amount of lard. Every single one of this high fat chow. And it's deliberate to demonize, But then there's seed oil in there. There's fructose in there. There's certain starches as well. Sugar alcohols. There's all sorts of stuff in there. And then they say, this is the high fat diet equivalent. No, what it is it's basically the equivalent of a McDonald's, feast, in the form. We know that, just look at New York City. There's actually studies on New York City rats that eat McDonald's and fast foods. They're all diabetic, the rats in New York. Not only the humans, but also even the rats over there are diabetic. As I said, I'm a details person. They're exposed to a food environment that is engaging the Randall cycle and a food environment that actually is causing these problems. Yes, so it's just crazy stuff. Yeah, never ends with these cockwombles. Yeah, you have to cook pork, as I said, for 32 hours before you get any oxidative products. Otherwise, just trace. Non-issue. So even when they use that argument, I go, well, look at my video. Took 32 hours. Who's going to cook anything for 32 hours? And the ones that had trace amounts were being cooked for 3 hours. Who in the carnivore community cooks meat for 3 hours? You get trace amounts. That is a non-issue, let alone when you're only cooking it for half an hour or 20 minutes to 40 minutes that most people cook it at most within that, and others even less than that. 15 minutes on both sides, just at a high temperature. So, it's nonsense. This is just complete and utter rubbish that these people are looking at, these really manufactured. Remember, the food industry wants to do one thing: confuse. If the food industry did like all the industry, the health industry, the big pharma, they like to confuse. Because that's how it works. By muddying up the waters, as one academic put it. And by muddying up the waters, what you do is you make things so confusing, people go, put their hands up and say, I've got no idea. One group says this, one group says that. Because really, as we say, there's no real science. As Bart would say, there's no real science. It's all fabricated stuff to create confusion. So, because it's much easier to confuse people and manipulate people. And that's how it works. So, yeah. But look, I love pork and I love bacon. And, and actually, remember the rat study that actually they induced cancer in the rats? They gave other meats to the rat. They gave bacon to the rat, and the bacon reduced the cancer in the colon. So is it the bacon that it actually causes the colon cancer, or is it all the other shit that they put in with the actual bacon and then point the finger at the bacon? If you're going to do studies that are going to claim that something causes something, you need to do a mechanistic study where you only show just that item being eaten and nothing else. You can't combine foods and then claim that one food is causing the problem and ignoring the other.
Yep.
That's fabrication, or deliberately misrepresenting what you're actually your data, because it's highly confounded nonsense.
Yep.
And it's basically on the bias that meat is bad. Do you hear that, boys and girls? Meat is bad. So based on that nonsense, they then fabricate reality and do their hocus pocus stuff. But when you just eat the bacon or just eat the meat, your insulin to glucagon is very low. You only get a bit of signaling of IGF-1, a bit of signaling of mTOR, a bit of signaling of insulin. Those growth factors aren't very elevated. And then those associations just magically disappear. I wonder why they don't want to do pure carnivore experimental studies, because that would really show how the whole narrative that they've been pushing for a long time is false. And then we would be able to would have massive ammo. People say, well, why doesn't the cattle industry do it? Let me put it this way. The cattle industry, people in the cattle industry are also part of a big agricultural network. They also produce grains. They also produce a whole lot of other things. And so they make money from those things.
Exactly. There's much more aggregate value in processed foods than meat.
Exactly. Precisely. And the ones that the small amount of people, the ones that are actually producing just meat because they're really into it and all that, they don't have the resources to fund these big studies. At most, you may do a 5-person study. A 5-person study is not going to give you anything because statistically, it may be significant, but we know the actual power of that study is so weak because of 5 people that you can't actually infer anything. And it would be laughed out of any academia. Even myself, I would laugh at it, even if it showed a positive effect. Because pretty much you cannot do that sort of stuff. You need a large population group to be able to do a proper population study on the effects of certain ways of eating. And that's sort of the biggest problem. You can do mechanistic studies and say, well, does that cause this type? Does it increase the reactive protein or do this or that? And you can actually do those quite clearly and show that it doesn't. And then from that extrapolate from mechanistic studies. But still, to convince people, then you have to also cover with big randomized control studies where it includes quite a few hundreds or thousands of people. And if you can't do that, then it's really hard to convince people out there. And the food industry, going to pay for that sort of stuff. Let's not be crazy. They know the Randall cycle exists. It's been known since 1963. Just because it's not taught, that's deliberate. So they can create the confusion. And this is why the arguments between the low carb and the low fat community still go on to this day. And they'll continue going on because both sides think they're right. And both are completely ignorant about the Randall cycle. So they don't know why they're right and why the mixing is the problem. So, and usually what happens is the low-fat people will say, look, that person was eating carbohydrates and then started eating more fat and they got sick. It's the fat. And then the low carbers will say the same thing. It's the sugar. Once they started eating more sugar, they got sick. They should have stayed low carb. And it's just 2 tribes saying that their way is the best way. So like 2 religions, pretty much. And that's what we've got. And it's a great system. It's muddied up because it's really hard then to convince people that the food industry out there makes these lovely, tasty, appetizing things that suppress satiety and make you want to eat more and more because they know it works. It makes them a lot of shit, loads of money. That's how it works. Yes. Anyway, I am going to pull the pin because we're nearly at 3 o'clock. So I know there's a lot of other questions that I haven't answered. I do apologize for that, but got to get them in early, as one is saying. Baked in the oven. Yes. See you, Babs. And Shelley was just going to go and cover a few of that. She enjoys her patties. And look, you got a laugh out of it, which is good. You're welcome, Shelley. Take care as well. And because I have to be somewhere, so so I have to pull the pin a bit earlier. Otherwise, I would have stayed a bit longer. We would have probably ended up doing 4 hours, but yes, I got to be somewhere else.
My sleep schedule is thankful.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for everyone who's basically super chatted as well. So appreciate that. And thanks for supporting the channel.
Yep.
There's going to be I'm trying to get a bit more content here and there out on certain controversial issues and stuff like that. So just I know it's hard with a day job. It's just trying to get stuff in. I recently did a chat about a bit over a week now. It's a bit more than a week with Annabelle, so it's going to be on her channel. So an interview.
Awesome.
So I'll put the link in the community page when that comes out.
Nice.
And also with Claire, who's in France. So she interviewed me last night. So as I said, no rest for the wicked. I'm always busy doing something. And so that should be out at some stage, maybe next week or the following week. Once that's out, once I'm told about it, I'll put it in the community page, and so people will be able to go to it. I'm also organising next Saturday, with Claire to do one on cancer. So she's gonna do a Q&A and ask me a whole lot of questions in regards to cancer. So we're going to do a specific one on cancer. So it'll cover all these sort of things. Before I leave, thanks, mate. He's trying to keep me here. Stay, hurry before you leave, please. Okay. I'm one of those sulfur intolerant. Like Bart. Okay. So you say, if I'm taking taurine, I should supplement choline as well. Yes, to help with. Yep, that's what you should do. You should basically use choline for that purpose. So just get a standard choline malate bitrate. Sorry, choline bitrate from. You get a good one from Amazon. They don't really, which has got 0 fillers. You have to get one that's got 0 fillers. That means nothing else other than choline bitrate. So that's the one you want, and so that should help. Probably about, I'd say, if you're doing, probably need 1 gram of choline if you're doing up to about 4 grams of taurine. If you're doing above 4 grams of taurine, probably 4 to 6 grams above that, you probably need 2 grams to deal with that. Play around with it in a sense and see how it works for you. It's really a bit of a trial and error. I find that some people, just 1 gram is all they need. Other people need 2 or 3 grams. It varies quite a bit amongst people. So that's the easiest way of going about it. Also, if you're taking sulfur like taurine, take it in small amounts. Like start with 2 grams. Get the body used to it for about a week or so. Then transition to a bit more. So go in 2 grams. Then after a week, go to another 2 grams, and another week, another 2 grams. So go in small increments. Get the body used to it, and try and work out your choline sort of requirements, the sort of threshold. You should know, because you'll actually have, you'll get certain like flatulence and other things like that in a, mild, I wouldn't worry about, but severe, it could be problematic and cause some like irritation in your gut. Yeah, so things like that. It's a matter of playing around with it. The problem is, look, taurine in its powdered form, in a food, it comes in a free form, but is sort of, it seems to be tolerated a bit a bit better in that sort of regard. But in a powdered form, the level of sensitivity goes up, so it's a bit of a catch-22 in that regard. So we're in the food, it's combined with the food, it's uptaken with the other amino into an amino pore, that middle part of the actual. A lot of it goes in the middle part of the small intestine, and so it tends to have this, you could say, less interaction or reactivity with the gut, in a sense. Where in a powdered form, if you're sensitive to sulfur, it tends to have this much stronger effect. So it's a matter of desensitizing yourself in a sense, going slow and seeing how you go and sort of trying to manage it in that regard. I hope that sort of gave you a bit of an idea how to go around it. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. So we'll move on. Thank you. And well, that is it. See you guys.
That is it. See you, everyone.